The focus is on mental health and well-being from a holistic lens. My name is James, and I'm the transition navigator at Sick Kids and Toronto General, and I'll be a co-host of today's session.
Hi everyone, my name is Sindhu and I'm a social worker at the Toronto General Red Blood Cell Disorders Clinic, and I'm also a co-host. So we'd like to open the series with a land acknowledgement. We do this to recognize the lands that we are on, as well as to identify and confront colonization and white supremacy on Turtle Island. So we are meeting in a virtual space today, and I encourage you to reflect on the lands that you are coming from and your relationship with it. So today we are speaking from the Red Blood Cell Disorders Clinic, which operates in what is colonially known as Toronto. This land is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe Nation, including the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Wendat, and other Indigenous nations since time immemorial. Today, the land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
So long before this land was stolen, it was and continues to be protected by the Dish with One Spoon, an agreement among allied Indigenous nations to share and care for the land and resources around the Great Lakes. This land is also subject to the Geswentha, an agreement originally made between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch. The Geswentha is a living treaty that articulates relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples based on peace, friendship, non-interference, and respect for each other's ways.
I reflect and acknowledge that I am not Indigenous to this land. I come to this land as the child of Tamil immigrants and refugees from Sri Lanka. This land provided my family and myself with refuge and an opportunity to go to school and work. Many Indigenous folks don't share in these privileges, these basic human rights, due to the ongoing legacy of colonialism.
And I am not Indigenous, rather I'm a settler of colonial ancestry. So my parents came from England to Canada, and I, like many others, have greatly benefited from living on the Indigenous land. I acknowledge and continue to learn about the brutal impacts of colonization and the impacts that this has caused. I come with respect for this land that I'm on today and for the people who have and do reside here. We'd also like to acknowledge that anti-Black racism persists in healthcare, education, housing, child welfare, employment, immigration, and justice systems. These systemic inequities can be directly traced to the legacy of the enslavement of African and African descendant peoples, which happened in Canada. We also recognize the excellence of Black communities, including resistance as well as contributions to Canadian society. Aisha is a certified health coach and the founder and owner of Me to Moi Health. With over 15 years experience in mental health, accessibility, and diversity and inclusion, Aisha has used her experience as a strategic advisor and health coach to understand the complexity and intersectionality of the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual barriers that keep people from achieving their optimized health and wellness. Aisha holds a master's in public health administration and law, as well as a certification in change management, advanced crisis intervention and counseling, and health coaching. She's also an integral master for the Canadian Olympic Committee of Canada and is a published author. Most recently, Aisha was selected as one of the top 30 women leaders to look out for.
Everyone, it is so nice to say happy Junior Friday and happy June 1st. We are in a new month, and Mother Nature is definitely letting us know that we have immersed ourselves into what I hope is what summer will look like. Maybe not as hot and steamy, but certainly with all the sunshine that is coming our way. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, thumbs up. Can we see? Everything is good. All right. So it would help if I didn't put myself on mute. It is nice to be back here again, and hard to believe that this is my last session. So as you know, there is 5 parts to this holistic health series. So I do hope if this is the first time you're joining that you will sign up for the other 2 sessions because they're going to be amazing. If you are a veteran and have been joining us for the last 3 sessions, welcome back. It is very nice to see you. Again, for my veteran participants, I just ask that you be patient as I kind of just go through what this looks like, just to kind of set the stage and the context for today's conversation, which is a much lighter one to the one that we had 2 weeks ago, which is how do we stay in the green, right? And certainly, as you just heard, as a certified health coach, which can mean a lot of different things for different people, the role that I continue to play in this space and the one that I'm always love to do is to really support and empower people on how we continue to take empowered action when it comes to our mental health at all ages and stages of life. Recognizing that our mental health is impacted by our lived experiences and the systems and structures that are around us, right? The intent of these continued conversations, and again, I really commend UHN and the Red Blood Cell Clinic for continuing these conversations, is how do we, where we have control, take control of our mental health, right? And the second important piece of today's conversation, which is not necessarily, as I said, connected to this conversation, but really is important when we enter into spaces like this, that we remain accountable to the things that we say and what we share, that this is a safe and judgment-free space, recognizing that our lived experiences shapes our perspectives. And if somebody shares something, I ask that it stay in the space. We kind of apply the Vegas rule. So what happens in this space stays in the space. We are not here to weaponize anything that is shared, that we are also going to be open and willing and listening. And most importantly, that if someone shares something that they're not necessarily in agreement with, it is absolutely fine to disagree, but it is always important that we do so with respect. And so I just want you to be mindful of that. And so tonight's topic, which I said is a certainly lighter one than the last one that we had 2 weeks ago, which was on intersectionality and mental health, is about how we stay in the green, right? And so for those who had an opportunity to participate in my first session, which was just really talking about what mental health looks like, I referred to a term called staying in the green, which really refers to our good state of mental health. Now, when I say good health or good mental health, I don't mean that we're experiencing, you know, like lollipops and gumdrops and everything's amazing, and that we're not experiencing normal feelings of sadness or stress or anger, because it's really important to recognize that those are important feelings and behaviors and emotions that we actually need to experience when we talk about staying in the green and having a balanced mental health, right? When I say staying in the green, again, I mean our ability to function day to day, to actually ebb and flow through the ups and downs that come with life. But again, always being able to stay in an optimistic and positive space. And so as part of our continued focus and commitment to mental health, if there's anything that I hope you have taken from these last 3 sessions, is that having good mental health requires work, right? That it requires time and commitment to do the things we need to do in various aspects of our life to ensure that we are positively impacting our lives, right? As individuals who are living and thriving through the existing challenges, right, that are often associated with living with a red blood cell disorder, there is much that, you know, within that experience that cannot be controlled, right? And so as we talk about mental health and we talk about the importance of taking empowered action, we really need to be focused on, and what this presentation is going to talk about, are those things that we do have control over, right? And I'll get into detail around what, you know, again, our time together tonight is going to look like, right? And so because that taking empowered action and placing energy and time is so important, you know, again, what we start to show is how we take proactive approaches in ensuring, again, that we're staying in the green, right? Now, of course, what always offers really good context, and for anyone who wasn't able to join our session 2 weeks ago on intersectionality and mental health, I'm going to do a really quick recap, because what it does is it also provides some context as to what we're going to be talking about tonight. And again, for those who missed it, you get a little bit of a synopsis as to what was discussed. So as I said, we talked about intersectionality and mental health, which, as we know, is a really important conversation in this space. And really the fact that we all are existing with many dimensions of diversity that make up who we are. Having that conversation is really important around understanding where we can access support, what does support look like, how do we even address mental health, what stigma exists within our communities when we're seeking opportunities to get support for mental health, right? Again, another area or importance of this topic is the fact that intersectionality is important because, as we heard, health inequities exist. There remain continued barriers to access to care, and people living, especially for those living with red blood cell disorder, experience stigma. You know, intersectionality, which we defined as the many different layers of social stratification that can combine to disadvantage people, right? This can include factors like race, sexual orientation, social class, age, disability, and gender. We know many mental health disparities exist among marginalized populations, and this impacts care, right? Which we know can be impacted by racial profiling. It can result in slow, poor, or no service and support, which ultimately can have some very deadly consequences, which we talked about. We know stigma that is associated with, again, these dimensions of diversity, along with dealing with mental health and along with dealing with a chronic red blood cell disorder, can be extremely negative on our mental health. We talked about racism and anti-Black racism and ableism as also being huge proponents that can negatively impact our mental health and can result certainly in internalized feelings of shame, hopelessness, isolation, and reluctance to ask for help. And the fact that we need to be mindful, certainly as individuals within our own communities, about how we may be inadvertently contributing to stereotypes and stigmas within our community, where we're creating even additional barriers for people to seek support, right? And of course, we talked about, again, always, the larger theme of this around how do we take empowered action? What are the things that we need to do that are within our control to make sure that we are always taking care of our mental health? And so that's why we're ending, this session on a high note, because we really want to focus on what are the things that we can do to take care of our mental health, right? I'll talk a little bit about understanding what it means to really stay in the green. And then we're going to dig a little bit deeper from, when we had our first session around what are the 5 ways to stay in the green. Now, again, when I provide these lists, this certainly doesn't mean that they're exhaustive. There might be other things that you're actively doing right now that continue to keep you in the green. But this is, of course, based on feedback and studies that show that these 5 areas really do positively support mental health. So one of the first things that we'll talk about is seeking support, right? That counseling should be seen as an act of self-care, and all the reasons why we need not fear what counseling can do for us. Understanding food is fuel, right? And understanding the connection between food and how it can have a positive effect on our mental health. The power of learning new skills. We'll talk about our environment, right? How our environment is also conducive to our wellness, and what are things that we can do are very simple around supporting our mental health. Being mindful of messaging overload, right? We are inundated on a continuum, social media, TV, news, CP24, internet. We are constantly getting messaging that we need to be aware of how it is affecting our mental health. And the last part, which I think is going to be really exciting and something I always enjoy doing with people, is the creation of a personal mission statement. Because the reality is, creating a personal mission, and I don't want to give away too much, allows us to hyper focus on ourselves, right? It allows us to put energy and time and space on ourselves so that we are now, again, positioned to ensure that we are doing the things, we are connecting with the people, or we're perhaps removing and eliminating people, places, and things that are no longer serving us so that we can continue to take care of our mental health. And of course, at the end, I always leave room for questions and answers for those who have anything that they'd like to ask, right? And so when we talk about staying in the green, there's 2 really key things that are important to talk about. One is that this isn't just about surviving. It really is about thriving. It's about feeling as though we are operating from a constant state of greatness, whatever that means. That is physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, financially, right? That we want to constantly, thrivation is not a word, but I like to use that word, so I'm going to make it up. That we're constantly in a state of thrivation. And the other piece to this is that fundamentally, mental health is fundamentally about self-care and seeing it as an act of self-preservation. Again, for those who joined the first session, you'll recall that I said oftentimes we will seek support around mental health when we hit crisis, right? So we'll say, I need to see a counselor. There's changes that I need to make. I need to cut off this relationship. When we hit the point of being in the orange or the red, which is in crisis. And if we see mental health as being a priority in our life, and we recognize, again, which we'll talk about, the importance of true self-care, then what we start to see this as the act of self-preservation, that the things that we do, the ways in which we behave, the choices that we make are intended to ensure that we are preserving ourselves in the best state. Right? And so the first thing is about counseling. So using the chat, or you can use the emoji, who, and again, there's no pressure to share if you do not want to, but if you're open to sharing, who has engaged in counseling? Has anybody done counseling before? If you have, what was your experience? Did you like it? If you haven't done counseling, and again, are willing to share, what have been some of the barriers, or what are some of the struggles around seeking that external support? Again, no pressure if you don't want to, but always great to know where people are at when it comes to counseling. And so while again, we briefly touched on this in session 1 around the importance of seeking external support, again, there remains a lot of taboo when it comes to seeking counseling or external support, whether our hesitation or skepticism is connected to our belief systems, or we've had a bad experience in the past, which can happen. There are many people that struggle with the idea of getting help, or that help can only be initiated, as I said, when we're in a state of crisis, right? But if we believe that, again, our mental health is something that we need to actively practice and are committed to, then we need to see, counseling as not just an intervention, but a preventative measure, as an opportunity for us to continue to do the things that we need to do to stay in the green, right? Again, when we talk about mental health, this conversation isn't just about feeling great. Counseling also offers us the ability to say, you know what, I've been struggling a little bit, or I've been feeling like I've been dealing with anger, or I feel like there's a change in my behavior. It allows a bit of a third party to help you flush out the things that are happening in your head, and where we have a tendency, what I call the inner chatter, to convince ourselves that everything is okay, or that we don't need support. That inner chatter, that little voice in our head has the ability to sometimes stop us or create barriers to us seeking support, right? And so counseling is an act. We need to see counseling as an act of self-care. If we are committed to feeling great physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually, then we have to change the narrative about counseling and see it as one or more, or see it as an opportunity, right? That we get to, remember we talked about the have to and the get to, that we get to enact as a means of taking care of ourselves. And so you'll see on the screen some of the benefits of counseling, right, are improved communication and interpersonal skills. So if there's always a struggle to articulate how you're feeling, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling anxious, counseling can offer you the right words to say, this is how I'm feeling. It can support improved self-esteem and self-acceptance. Definitely has the capability to change self-defeating behaviors and habits. As I said, we talk about that inner chatter. And it's that little voice that says, you're not deserving, you're not worthy, you shouldn't do that, it's not the right time. Being able to flush that out loud and allowing yourself to hear the things that you tell yourself, and having somebody else share with you what it is that you tell yourself, can be a huge game changer in the way that you take care of yourself, and particularly in the way that you see yourself. More suitable expression and management of emotions. It can help relief from depression and anxiety or other mental health conditions. It can also help you gain greater confidence and decision-making skills, right? So we don't also just seek counseling, just for the record, around mental health. Counseling can be offered and enacted to support changes in our life. If we have a huge life decision that we want to make and we don't necessarily want to talk to people in our inner circle, counseling is a great space to do so. It can really help ability to manage stress more effectively. If you struggle with how to stay balanced or how to address stress, counseling is a great channel to do so. Improved abilities for problem solving and conflict resolution. So there's a lot. And again, this list is absolutely not exhaustive, but certainly found it can definitely be a great support. And you are correct, Jenny, that it can be quite pricey, right? And I know that, if we look at the structural and some of the systemic barriers in those who would like to seek counseling, price is absolutely a factor. I believe, and when we get to the Q&A portion, I had, and it actually might have been posted, I had actually sent in some resources that are free individuals that are seeking support, seeking counseling, of therapists across, the community, that if you are open, we can talk more about that at the end, where you might be able to access some supports if you are willing and would like to do counseling. And so when we talk about, again, our next step, or our next important part when it comes to mental health, is seeing food as fuel. So again, in our first session, we talked about, the foods that make us feel good, the foods that make us feel happy. And I have a long list of foods that certainly make me happy. When it comes to summer, ice cream is definitely at the top of my list. But again, right, we spent a lot of time talking about the importance of food and the ways in which it can positively or negatively affect you and impact our mental health. But I want to get a little bit deeper to really understand the connection between food as fuel and how it can really support our mental health. And so the link between diet and emotion stems from the close relationship between our brain and our gastrointestinal tract. I can never say that, often called the second brain. And so really this is how it works, right? So your GI tract, not to get too biological, is home to billions of bacteria that influence the production of chemical substances that constantly carry messages from the gut to the brain. And two common examples, which I don't think will be things that you haven't heard of, is that of dopamine and serotonin. And so eating nutritionally dense food promotes the growth of good bacteria, which in turn positively affects the production of these chemicals, right? So when production is optimal, your brain receives these positive messages loud and clear, and your mental state can reflect it, right? Think about the foods like McDonald's or Wendy's or really greasy food. They taste good. They absolutely taste good. But I want you to think about how you feel immediately after. You feel heavy. Some people feel foggy. They feel lethargic because your body is not getting the proper nutrients and it's not firing off the dopamine and the serotonin that's needed to say, hey, I'm full, or I'm feeling good, or my brain is feeling like my gut is full and getting what it needs, and now firing to my brain to say, I've got some good mental clarity, right? Sugar in particular is considered a major culprit of inflammation, right? It feeds bad bacteria in the GI tract. And ironically, it can also cause a temporary spike in the feel good and then the crash. So, when we, if you're working or you're out and you're like, I'm feeling tired, what do? We oftentimes will have something sweet. We're like, I just need a little bit of sugar just to pick me up. And it does. You get 2 o'clock fix, you take the sugar, you're like, whoa, I feel amazing. And then what happens about an hour or 2 hours later, by the time you get home, you're done. You drop, you dip, right? You don't want that either. You don't want the quick pickup and then the drop, because these spikes can really cause, again, sugar rush, and again, followed by a very hard crash. And so when we stick to, I don't like the word diet, but when we stick to a way of eating that is nutrient enriched foods, you're setting yourself up for fewer mood swings and an improved ability to focus and just overall feeling good. And so studies have even found that clean diets consisting of mainly whole foods, and I'll get a little bit more into that, what a whole food looks like. Unprocessed foods can help with symptoms of depression and anxiety, whereas unhealthy diets, again, which are sometimes very high in sugar, high in fat, high in grease, again, can be linked and have been linked to increased risk of dementia or stroke. And so foods that help us stay healthy are some of the foods that you see here. So when we talk about whole foods, right? Some studies show that preservatives, food coloring, and other additives may cause or worsen hyperactivity and depression. There might be individuals on this call, if you are a parent of a child, who have noticed behavioral changes. Red dye is a very popular one. Foods and snacks that are very high in sugar or salt can have an impact on the brain, right? And can cause people to fluctuate in mood or in emotion. And if you have one thing to remember, it's to eat as best as possible real food. And when we say real food, it means fruits, it means vegetables, healthy grains, where feasible, right? Holistic, the powerful nutrients produced by colorful produce have tons of properties that support the mind and the body. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen that, the Canadian Food Guide, kind of what's on the screen right here. They say the more colors on your plate, the better it is, right? So greens and yellows and grapes is not a color. I feel like a child, like a purple, right? But all the amount of colors that you have is a strong reflection that you are eating good whole foods that are, again, going to offer you positive mental health and will be firing those that serotonin and dopamine that we need in order to stay in the green. We then come to fiber, right? So plant-based foods are full of fiber, which helps your body absorb glucose, right? Which we know is food sugars more slowly. And this really helps to avoid those sugar rushes and those crashes. So fiber-rich foods include, as we know, fruits, vegetables, and nutrient-filled like whole grains and beans, sweet potatoes, as much as possible from their original form to however you like to cook them. We have antioxidants, right? These inflammation fighters are especially plentiful in berries, in leafy green vegetables, the spiced turmeric, and foods with omega-3 fatty acids, including salmon and black chia seeds. Dark chocolate also, so anybody who loves chocolate, you do get to eat chocolate. And preferred dark chocolate contains antioxidants and healthy sugars. So indulge in moderation, like you can indulge, but make sure you continue to indulge in moderation. There's folate, and this is a type of vitamin B, which helps, again, the production of dopamine without forcing it to surge the way sugar does, right? So again, it is a natural progression that the body is able to process, and therefore, again, ensures that we are in the green and that we're feeling positive and we don't have that, again, that peak up and then that crash, right? You can find it in green leafy vegetables, in lentils, as well as cantaloupes is where you will find folate. We have vitamin D, which we know helps with the production of serotonin. And we usually get it from the exposure of the sunlight. So again, where it is possible and where it's not too much. I mean, today was quite hot. We had a heat advisory, but exposure to the sun is really important for our body and our mental health. But another source of vitamin D, mushrooms, is another great resource if you like mushrooms. Is as well as other supplements if vitamin D is an issue. We have magnesium, right? So this essential mineral really helps with everything from nerve and muscle function to keeping steady heartbeat, but it's also vital for food-mood connection, right? Which a lot of people don't know. A mineral deficiency in this space can hurt the bacteria in your gut and cause depression and anxiety-like symptoms, right? So really important to load up on magnesium. And some of, again, the places that you can find this food are in cashews, spinach, dark leafy greens, bananas, and beans. And again, these are probably all things that everyone eats on a continuum. Hopefully, at the very least, you like some of these suggestions. And then we have fermented foods. So fermented foods are packed with probiotics, which are certain live bacteria that are good for your digestive tract. Again, examples of this are sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, tempeh, and fermented drinks like kombucha. A lot of people don't like kombucha because they feel like it tastes like fermented fruit, but it's very good for you, right? And these foods also tend to be high in sodium, so you have to be careful around how much you consume, right? So there's always a plus and a negative, but what I have here, before you are foods that have directly been connected to providing benefits to the mental health, right, of individuals. And so again, the benefits of food are, it can help build self-esteem, right? Because again, if our gut is healthy and it is sending those messages to our brain, then we're operating in a much more positive mindset, right? It can improve your overall energy. It certainly will improve your overall brain function and has the ability to reduce depression, feelings of depression, right? So when we talk about self-esteem, it usually starts with that, again, that positive body image, and eating healthy is obviously one of those key aspects. And so how do we, again, continue to nurture ourselves so that, we are doing the things that we need for our body, so that we, again, in turn, are also subsequently doing good for our mental health. Again, when we talk about our energy level, it is important that we do what we need to do to stay in the green. And when we talk about energy, again, it doesn't mean that we're out here running marathons or that we're doing extreme activities, but good energy in our ability, again, that we're getting good sleep, that we feel alert during the hours that we're supposed to be up, again, where it is feasible. I am very mindful of the fact that when there are certain challenges that are being experienced living with a red blood cell disorder, this is not as easy to do. But again, if we continue to be proactive, what it can do is sometimes minimize the impact or the significance or the strength of an episode that might happen. It is not a guarantee, but again, what we're also looking at is not just intervention, but we're also really focused on prevention. As I said, what we talked about is overall brain function, that we're just able to feel alert, that we don't go through this peak of like, I can do 1,000,001 things. I don't know if anyone's ever felt that way. Like you take something, you have a drink, an energy drink, or you have, again, sugar, and you feel like you can run a marathon while cleaning your home, while doing homework with the kids. And then about 2 hours later, the only thing you want is your bed, right? So we want to make sure that we're eating foods that allow us to stabilize our brain, and that we're not feeling those big highs and then those big drops. And of course, again, the ability to reduce depression symptoms can also be facilitated, as I said, by eating healthy foods. So another part when we talk about staying in the green is learning a new skill. So again, only if you're willing to share. I would love to hear, who has a hobby? If you do have a hobby, what is that hobby? Do you have a hidden talent that people don't know that you have? Or something that makes you happy? Is there something that you've learned in the last little bit that has really been a game changer in your mental health, that is offering you a different outlet or a space to just maybe be creative, that you would like to share? Again, no pressure, right? But research shows that learning a new skill can also improve your mental well-being by boosting, again, self-confidence and raising self-esteem, helping you to build a sense of purpose, helping you to connect with others, right? So one of the ways, as I said, is you'll gain confidence and gaining knowledge. Oh, let's see what's in the chat. Writing, okay. I look forward to your book, Sinthu, no pressure, if that's what's coming. Gaining knowledge and skills improves self-confidence. Studies show, that you'll be able to take on new tasks, either at work or at home, when you add on a new skill. And when I say new skill, I don't want you to just think within the context of work. A new skill could be, maybe handiwork. A new skill could be writing. A new skill could be drawing. There's a lot of different things when I talk about new skills. So it doesn't have to, dancing. Okay. That is super cool. Definitely a really cool skill to have. Others likely will seek your advice, right? On like, I see some changes in you. Like, what have you been doing lately that you seem a lot happier? You seem just a lot more engaged. What's been happening? So people start to see the change in your own being when it comes to, again, taking on a new skill and the confidence that's built through that, right? The ability to learn something new and then to master it automatically creates greater confidence. You'll become a lot more curious, right? So when you learn a new skill and master it, then it kind of naturally intrigues you to want to try something new or something different, right? When you're busy learning something new, especially something that you find interesting, as I said, you'll naturally pique your own curiosity. And what's interesting is research shows that curious people feel more positive emotions, less anxiety, and are overall more satisfied with life and the world around them. In short, they find more enjoyment in their day-to-day lives because curious people tend to see the novelty in the world around them, right? So, what is this? Or I'd like to learn about this, or I saw this particular, this particular bird. I'm really interested, in learning more. So I thought that was a really interesting study, that curiosity, even though there's that quote, curiosity killed the cat, in this case, it actually can support your mental health. Another really cool thing that can support mental health when you learn a new skill is you'll find connection, right? When we do dance, as you know, to when we're writing, you never know who else is in that space, who you'll connect with, right? One of the most obvious benefits, right, of learning a new skill is the ability to meet other people, because you're increasing your chances. You might be going out, you might have to go to a class, whether it's online or in person. You naturally connect with people. And we know, particularly over the pandemic, some of the greatest impact that negatively impacted people's mental health was the inability to connect with people, right? And so you might find people that are not just interested in this new skill, but in other aspects that you're really interested or passionate about. You can establish new friendships, new relationships. They might pique another curiosity where you now find another set of connection. So it's a really positive trickle-down effect. Another great part when you learn a new skill is you're pushing your boundaries and really exploring your greatness, right? You're challenging yourself to do something differently. You're challenging yourself in new ways, which is really cool. We often think of challenges as negative, right? So when we hear the word challenge, we automatically think it's a negative, but it actually isn't, because what it allows you to do is to see how much further you can push yourself, right? We get comfortable in our safe space because it's what we know, it's what we do, right? Routine is good, but routine also doesn't affect elevation. It doesn't always promote change. It doesn't always allow us to see what we have the ability to do. And again, the ability to master something that seemed challenging is huge when it comes to our mental health, and can naturally start to change, again, that inner chatter, that narrative that, as I talked about before, says, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, it's going to be a struggle, I'm scared, it's hard. That narrative starts to say, okay, you know what? I mean, I know it might be a little bit challenging, but I'm going to try it. What's the worst that can happen? I find out I don't like it. I find out I actually maybe am good at it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. And again, all of those things consciously and subconsciously start to positively affect our mental health. You'll become more creative, right? And again, when I say creative, I don't mean necessarily in drawing or in writing or in dancing, but creativity is the ability to think outside of our own box, right? So as an example, with gardening, you begin with nothing more than just seeds, right? Seeds, soil, and water. But you can grow your very own harvest, right? And then, or maybe you just started with, example, spices. And then you think, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll plant a cucumber. And then maybe next year I'll try something else, right? It starts to pique the ability to see, okay, well, what else can I do? What else can I create? Creating really does improve mental health and physical health by giving you an outlet where you're actively flexing your creative muscles. It helps you build a different set of skills that you maybe didn't think you had. And whatever that new skill or subject you choose to learn, you actually might be surprised about how good you are and what the benefits actually turn out to be for your physical and mental health. You'll gain a new skill, again, that you can employ in some way, shape, or form, whether it's at work, whether it's with friends. Maybe it helps you start a new business. Who knows, right? Until we try, we don't actually know. And then arguably the greater benefit is just an overall improvement in your peace of mind and enjoyment in life and the world around you, right? So that's, again, one of a few benefits of around our mental health when it comes to taking up a new skill. So for those who didn't identify if they have a new skill, I would highly encourage you to see what you can take on. The next one is to create an environment that promotes wellness, right? So another important discussion in our commitment to staying in the green is really being mindful of our environment, right? Well, there are many environments that we have no control over. So if you're a student, if you're in a workplace, if you are, again, a parent who's sending your child to school, there's only so much control that we have over those systems and structures. But what we have control over is our own environment. We have control over the people that we welcome into our environment. We have control over what our environment looks like, how it feels, right? We want to ensure that we are creating a space for ourselves, that even if everything is happening as chaotic on the outside, that when we step into our space, it is our safe haven, right? It is the space that allows us to come back to a place of equilibrium, to be in the green, to feel good. And the facts are, our mental health can directly be impacted by anything in our environment. But the most notable factor, right, are some of the things that I share here, is sunlight, right? And not just being outside, but like actual sunlight. Studies have shown that decreased sun exposure has been associated with a drop in serotonin levels, which can lead to major depression with seasonal pattern. If you think about this spring, this was probably the longest and darkest winter into summer, into spring. I'm not someone who necessarily experiences that seasonal low, But I can honestly tell you, by March, I had had enough. I was like, if there is not going to be sun, it's one thing to be hot outside. It is another thing to be overcast and cloudy every single day. And you started to see a shift, certainly with clients, I started to see a shift in their mental health state by not being able to have sunlight, right? So the light induced effects of serotonin are triggered by sunlight that goes in through our eyes, right? Sunlight cues special areas in the retina, which triggers the release of serotonin. Now, I say this because I caution you, like I'm not telling you to go outside and open your eyeballs into the sun. Certainly don't do that. That will lead to other issues that, will be problematic. But it means within reason. It means making sure where you have, if you have a window, if you do get outside, to make sure that natural light is coming into your space. Numerous studies have found lower levels of vitamin D, again, with people who are living with depression, and that vitamin D supplementation, whether that is through sunlight or through food, as we talked about, or in some cases, some people do have to take supplements, can reduce the rates of depression and improve symptoms. And research points to vitamin D's role in regulating serotonin and calcium for its possible therapeutic impact on depression. So again, we see direct correlation between some of the things naturally that we can access and that of our mental health, right? Again, this is not to say that if you get sunlight or you have access to sunlight that you'll be cured of depression. That is absolutely not what I'm saying, but it does, again, support positive mental health, and can help someone feel change the mood, once we are mindful of the fact that we are, we need access to vitamin D through sun. Another one is the removal of clutter, right? Which we also call like the aesthetics, right? So cluttered spaces can really create feelings of feeling overwhelmed and anxiety, while tidy spaces can invoke a sense of calm, right? So if you're looking around and there's stuff everywhere, not to say that it isn't stuff that you don't need, but if it's not arranged, if you feel like you're just constantly in this smaller space because there's things everywhere, it can have an impact on our mental health. Even colors, like the colors of your room, the colors of your space, dark colors, kind of dreary colors can have an impact on your mood. Again, this doesn't mean that you go and paint your room hot pink, because that can kind of do the pendulum swing, where it's causing a little, maybe not having you feel low, but it might not also bring relaxation. But having colors and objects in your environment that are meaningful, that can also boost your mood, right? You'll kind of see in the picture here, art pieces, there's books, there's sunlight, there's greenery, there's plants, sensory as well, right? The lighting, the temperature, sounds, smells, color palette, as I mentioned, of an environment are very important to how comfortable, relaxed, and safe you feel. And so again, if you have harsh lighting, that really bright lighting, if you are, maybe surrounded in a place where there's like really bright colors, it can cause stress and have you feeling overwhelmed. Same thing if you have very dark colors or it's a cold space, those can affect your mood, which ultimately can affect your mental health, right? There's also plants, right? Just seeing plants around can naturally have a positive impact on your mental health. And of course, the one thing that we can control but can't always control are people, right? So indirect, and I apologize, I did not put that on that list, but indirect or inconsistent, communication. If there's people in your life that aren't serving you, that aren't bringing you joy, that are causing you stress, can also impact your mental health. What makes it more difficult is if these individuals live with you, it does make it harder. And so again, some of the other areas that we talked about, the food, getting outside, finding creative ways to stay in the green, are the things that we need to double down on so that it can counter, some of the other areas in our life that we can't control or that we don't have as much control over. The next one, and this is a really big one, is really being mindful of the messaging that we get on a continuum. I know, and again, certainly over the pandemic, online has kind of become the way of life, right? It's where we get our information. It's how we access people. It's where we stay in the know, whether it's news, whether it's shows. I mean, everything is pretty much online. But we have to be very mindful, and I'm speaking specifically around social media. And again, if there are parents that are in this space, around being very mindful of what information, content, and how much of it we are allowing our children and youth, and certainly as individuals ourselves, how it can negatively affect our mental health, right? Communicate and stay up to date with family and friends around the world is really, social media, right? So I'm going to go to the positive before I talk about the negative, right? But we know social media or forms of being online, right? They do help us stay connected and communicate with people. We can find new friends and communities, network with other people who share similar interests or ambitions. So there are parts of, I don't want to make it seem like social media is terrible, right? As I go through this list, because there are really positive things that have come out of social media, or just, again, being online and other ways of connecting with people. You can join to promote worthwhile causes, raise awareness on important issues. You can seek or offer emotional support to others during tough times that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to, whether that's individually or collectively. That's not to say, don't pick up the phone. But these are other means that you can, provide support or seek support. You can find vital social connection if you live in a remote area, or if you have limited independence, social anxiety, or a part of a marginalized groups where you don't get out as much, but again, are able to stay connected to people within your community. You can find an outlet for your creativity and self-expression. And you can discover with care sources of valuable information. And I say with care because not all information is good information. Not all information is the right information. And this is where we have to decipher and kind of shift gears and talk about the negative aspects, right, of social media. An overload of messaging can be an unrealistic view and or expectation of life, right? So when you look and you scroll and you see all the amazing things that are happening for people, we think, well, why can't my life be like that? But we don't actually know what the story is behind the post, right? Fear of missing, my apologies, I put mission out. It should be missing out. I will make that correction. The fear of missing out. Again, if we're constantly saying that people are out here doing this, people are out here doing that, we might feel like we're missing out when in fact we're not. Social media can be quite addictive. I wish I had found, there was a study that I found a while ago talking about, in particular, social media addiction with young people, and the actual change in brain functioning that doctors are seeing, right? Their ability to concentrate, their ability to critically think, that association between what is real and what's not is becoming less as kids and young people find themselves more and more on social media. It can cause isolation. Depression and anxiety has absolutely been linked to excess social media, and self-absorption is also part of it, right? That if we're constantly wanting people to see and be and look at us, that it can create, again, it's not a direct correlation, right? But it can create increased self-absorption, narcissism, poor behavior, poor communication, are some of the things, side effects that we're seeing with increased access to social media, or individuals staying on social media for excess periods of time, right? And so when we talk about staying in the green, right, another huge component of this, which in my opinion is really central to what we've talked about over the last 3 sessions, and I think what is I think a fundamental component of this whole health series, is how do we take sometimes the energy that we are expelling externally and ensure that we're putting it on ourselves? Because at the end of the day, as I said, the systems, the structures are what they are, right? It's important that we continue to advocate, that we use our voice, that we use our power, that we use our privilege to affect the change that we need to see. But we also need to expel some of that energy on ourselves, identifying what it is that we need to do. How do we take care of ourselves? What are the people, places, and things that we need to bring in that are going to enrich our lives and support our mental health? And what are the people, places, and things that we need to remove so that we can continue to enrich our lives? And one of the best ways that we can do that is through the creation of a personal mission statement. And so using the chat, I would love to know if anyone has ever created a personal mission statement. You can just say yay or nay, or you can even give a thumbs up if you have. But let me first explain before we get into this activity. Let me just see what it says. All right, okay, I'm about to talk about it. I'm going to talk about what a personal mission is, and then we're actually going to do one. I mean, you will do one, and I'll kind of guide you through it. So a personal mission statement is really intended to provide clarity on the impact you desire to make, the people, places, and things that you will align with. Because again, what we have to recognize is being in our space is a privilege, right? It is a blessing to be in our space. What boundaries you will create or reinforce, and what you will not forego in the name of your values, belief, and your mental health, right? So you get really clear about what your larger purpose is, how you're going to show up, what it is that you need to do for yourself, how you're going to make yourself a priority, right? Creating a personal mission can be a tool also for making difficult decisions. It's a framework for how you want to live your life and express your life mission. It's a beacon to those around you about the kind of person that you are, right? Because we create the conditions by which people connect and talk to us. It's a declaration that motivates and inspires us to continue doing so. Even in those moments where you think to yourself, I'm tired, I don't want to do this, I'm fatigued. Going back to your personal mission is that reminder to say, no, there's a greater purpose. Like, I am here for a greater reason, and these are the reasons why. And it can be a statement of your values and life priorities, right? For not only yourself, but for the people around you. And so as discussed through this presentation, taking care of our mental health isn't a linear process. I always laugh and say it's really more like a 3-year-old trying to, stay in the lines, right? It requires active engagement and work in many areas of our life. And because we aren't just one-dimensional, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, as intersectional people, there's many competing priorities, right? And so our focus and our energy has to, is pulled in many directions. But even if it's pulled in many directions, we have a responsibility to ourselves to understand what direction are we moving in, right? And so by creating a personal mission, we are once again making a commitment to only engage with people, places, and things that serve us, right? And again, where we have control. But there is little or no control over, we don't always have control over who we care for, who we're connected with, who's in our lives, who's in our home, but you are absolutely in control around how you allow those external forces to impact you, right? And so it isn't difficult, and I'm going to walk you through what it looks like. Whether you have a pen, if you have a phone, definitely creative ways to do it. So the first step, the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to think about what is it that you want to achieve, do, or become. So you select one thing, like you identify, is there something that you want to achieve? Is there something that you want to do? Or is there something that you want to become? Right? I'll give it like 2 minutes. You can write it down. What is it that you want to do? Is there what would you like to do? What is it that you would like to achieve or become? One or the other. So is there something you want to do, achieve, or become? Put my little timer on and I'll give it 2 minutes. And for those who maybe it just came up really quickly because you already know what you wanted to do, achieve, or become, I want you to move on to the next question and say, why is what you want to achieve, do, or become important to you? So if you identify, I want to, example, go back to school to finish my degree. I want you now to think about why is what you want to achieve, do, or become important to you? And I'll put a timer on, I'll give that another 2 minutes. And no pressure if you are still writing or trying to figure it out. But for those who have finished, question number 1, again, which is what do you want to achieve, do, or become? And if you've completed number 2, which is why is what you want to achieve, do, or become important to you, you can now talk about, or I now want to identify what specific behavior or action am I going to employ to make this happen? Because many of us, and including myself, we will say, okay, these are the things that I want to do. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. But what we don't think about is what are we actually going to do? What is the action or the behavioral change that we are committing to so that what we want to achieve, do, or become happens, right? It's nice to have these things that we want to do, but how do we get to this is what I want to do to this is what I will or am doing? And what it requires is the identification of an action or a behavior that you are actively going to employ on a continuum to achieve this. And so that third question again is what specific behavior or action am I going to employ to make this happen? And I will give it again another 2 minutes. I'm going to put on my timer. And so now if you have finished that part, I'm going to change slides, but you'll still be able to see what the question will look like. And so this is how it's going to read. It's going to say, my personal mission is to, and where you identified what you want to achieve, do, or become, you're going to put it in that sentence. Because, and you're going to identify the reason why it is important to you. And I will do this by, and then you will identify what the specific action or behavior is to accomplish this, right? Now, if you need to add some words so that the sentence actually makes sense, don't worry about that. By all means, please do so. But it should read, again, my personal mission is to, what you want to achieve, do, or become, because, and again, the reason why you've identified it's important, full stop. And I will do this by, and then identifying what the specific action or behavior is that you've identified you're going to employ to achieve, so that what you want to achieve, do, and become will happen. Again, I'll give it about another 2-3 minutes. If you have finished and you would like to share, which I would love to see, but again, no pressure, put it in the chat, right? What are you committing to today? You know, what is your personal mission today? And one of the cool things about a personal mission is that it evolves as you evolve, as you grow. You know, today, wherever you are today is what your personal mission is. As you continue to focus on your mental health, as you continue to take care of yourself and bring in things into your life that serve you and you achieve them, you have an opportunity to now refine that personal mission, to change that personal mission so that it is now reflective of what your new state is, right? And how cool is it? It kind of sometimes serves as a bit of a, like a journal or like a time capsule, right? On this day, June 1st, 2023, my personal mission was to XYZ. And a year from now, again, as you evolve and you grow and you elevate, how cool would it be to go through this same exercise and be able to see what your personal mission is and start to explore, like, what changed for me? Like, you know, why is this my personal mission? What evolved? What took place that I'm now more focused on, right? I'll give it about another minute or two. And again, if you're willing to share or would like to share, feel free to put it in the chat. You might still be working on it as well. Right, let's do this. By taking time to clear my mind. Thank you for that. So you gotta stamp that. Like you said, I love that you put today as recognition that it is based on where you are at this very moment. Is there anyone else that wants to share? Thank you so much for sharing that. No, I'll give it another minute as I bring this to a close shortly. Anyone else has any thoughts or wants to share? No? Okay. Well, however wherever you are on, and it's not always easy. Oh, there's another one. Let me check in there. Yeah, vision boarding is phenomenal. Vision boarding, again, is another similar to a personal mission. It is a beautiful way to visualize what it is that you're also working towards. So anyone who hasn't ever done a vision board, that's also a great example or a great way to stay focused on the things that will bring you joy and where you need to place your energy so that you continue on your trajectory of just greatness, whatever that looks like, and how it continues to support your mental health. Thank you very much for sharing that. Vision boarding is phenomenal. And so again, as we focus on our mental health, as we continue to explore the ways, that we talked about earlier, whether it's food, whether it's being creative, whether it's learning a new skill, whether it's being mindful of our environment, right? At the end of the day, and again, if there's anything that is to be taken from these 3 sessions that have been done so far, is that this requires work, right? In order for us to take care of our mental health, we have to actively engage in things, be mindful of what we are inviting in, be mindful of our connections and the people around us, creating boundaries so that we are actively and proactively taking care of our mental health. There are scenarios, as I said, from day one, where we don't have control of our mental health, where things can happen, where we go from being in the green to being in crisis. But where we have ability to do so, be proactive, right? Be proactive and make mental health a preventative activity versus, or not mental health, excuse me, bring these things in as a preventative activity and actions as opposed to intervention. And because, of course, as you know, I love a quote. We know, what mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and certainly more unashamed conversations. And I cannot say this enough, but I really want to honor and just celebrate the Red Blood Cell Clinic for bringing this conversation to the forefront, for hosting. It's not over yet. I feel like, this is not the end, but this is, as I said, this is my time. I'm bringing my time in this 5-part series to a close. But the importance of continuing to bring this conversation, because it is only in these spaces, it is only in these conversations that we start to reduce the stigma, that we start to recognize that there's probably more people that are dealing with the same things that we're dealing with, which reduces, again, those feelings of shame and isolation. It is also opportunities for us to break down the barriers and the silos that are often felt within our communities, where we cannot have open and honest conversations about mental health and mental illness because of the stigma and the fear and the taboo-ness of these conversations. And so again, I just want to extend my huge thank you to the organizers of this series for the opportunity to present with all of you. And that brings me to a close of my last workshop on how we can stay in the green, and happy to take any questions, any comments, any thoughts that have come up for you over the last hour and a bit.